Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Recently, we covered the censorship of outspoken chief economists like Gao Shanwen, warning that the economy is in a much worse place than official narratives would have us believe. It appears that these criticisms have hit a nerve in Beijing, however. Yesterday, Chinese financial media outlet Cailian reported that regulators now require, quote, standardization of public statements, end quote, by chief economists, securities analysts, and fund managers in the country. According to the report from Thailand, securities regulatory bureaus in multiple regions have recently issued supervision requirements to brokerages and other entities aiming to strengthen the management of public statements, especially those made by chief economists, brokerage analysts, fund managers, and other industry practitioners. Let's examine some of the report. We'll see much use of euphemistic language here. We will quote the report now in translation from Chinese. Quote, according to multiple sources, at least one brokerage research institute has issued internal directives tightening management over its analysts. Analysts are required to fully regulate their speech and conduct, strictly adhere to professional standards, and be reminded that research reports should be the sole standard for expressing viewpoints. They are cautioned not to make sensational comments merely to grab attention, not to relax their standards to attract clients or follow hot topics, and not to test regulatory boundaries with a fluke mentality. Compliance requirements now explicitly prohibit practitioners from providing clients with any minutes of listed companies' research meetings in any form. Such meeting notes may only be kept on file internally or used as material for writing research reports. End quote. Veteran China analyst Bill Bishop observed on this development today, quote, recent candid comments by chief economists like Gao Shanwen of SDIC Securities must have really rankled, but I am not sure that muzzling and censoring candid discussion of the economy and markets will actually improve confidence. End quote. And of course, this move in of itself, regulating the speech of economists, is a tremendously concerning sign. Next up, it appears that China and India have made significant strides towards stabilizing their relations following the 23rd meeting of special representatives on the China-India border question held in Beijing this week. Chinese diplomat Wang Yi and Indian National Security Advisor Shia Ajit Doval engaged in detailed discussions resulting in a 6-point consensus aimed at resolving long-standing border tensions. The two sides agreed to, quote, maintain peace and tranquility along the line of actual control, LAC, end quote, and reaffirmed their, quote, commitment to finding a fair and mutually acceptable resolution to the boundary dispute adhering to the principles first established in 2005, end quote. Both nations pledged to advance this process through positive measures and ongoing dialogue. A key outcome of the meeting was the agreement to resume Indian pilgrimages to Tibet, specifically to revered sites such as Mount Kailash and Lake Manasarovar. This decision reflects a broader effort to enhance cross-border exchanges, including cooperation on river resources and the renewal of border trade via Nathula. The PRC does seem to be trying hard to stabilize relations with India, a major geopolitical rival, and with whom China has seen much tension and competition. Beijing is likely thinking, however, that it needs to focus on its eastern seaboard and not have its resources stretched at a time when it is facing potential conflict with the US and its allies. In a separate meeting this week, Indian National Security Advisor Doval also met with Chinese Vice President Han Zheng. Han emphasized the strategic importance of India-China cooperation, highlighting the upcoming 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations in 2025. Despite lingering tensions, particularly around the LAC, the consensus reflects a pragmatic approach by both countries to prevent border issues from overshadowing broader diplomatic relations. A majority of Indian public sentiment, 54.4%, as reported by the India-based Takshashila Institute, views the LAC dispute as the primary stressor or primary area of concern in bilateral ties with China, underscoring the importance of these recent developments in easing tensions and promoting regional stability. A notable group, 26.6%, also believes that China's inroads and influence in India's neighborhood is the second most vital stressor in the bilateral relationship, which is a surprising result, with respondents according lower significance to more visceral factors such as China-Pakistan friendship, India-US partnership, and the massive trade asymmetry favoring China. Next up, we have two more developments to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing is a tremendous help. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description for those who want to go the extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, or if you'd like to give a gift to the channel during this holiday season. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. This week, Brad Setster, a senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations, published an excellent piece discussing Chinese exports. I wanted to quote a few excerpts from the piece directly. Quote, China's weak domestic economy and ever-expanding production capacity, juiced with an explicit policy of directing state bank credit toward manufacturing, has led to a surge in Chinese exports. Because Chinese export prices are falling, think of the price of a solar panel, export volumes have been growing much faster than the dollar value of Chinese exports. The phenomenon is clear in their export volume data released by the General Administration of Customs, as well as global data compiled by Dutch CPB. The Dutch global data shows that Chinese exports are outpacing global trade, with Chinese exports up 12% or more in volume terms, while global trade is growing at more like 3%. What's more, the Dutch data shows that Chinese import volume growth has collapsed, and Chinese imports in value terms are now shrinking, looking at the year-on-year change in the 3-month moving average. On a year-over-year basis, Chinese export volumes are up 13%, while import volumes are only up 2%. With exports around 20% of GDP, the 10 percentage point gap implies a net exports contribution to Chinese growth of close to 2% of GDP. China's GDP data is a bit squirrely. China still doesn't produce data on real output in level terms, a rather stunning data gap that the IMF should not tolerate. The actual reported contribution may be more modest, but the basic idea is clear. Export volumes are way up and import volumes are contracting. China, sadly, doesn't seem ready to really wean itself off export-led growth. For all the talk of stimulus after China's September policy pivot, the proposed measures still underwhelm. They have included support for asset markets, notably by encouraging banks to lend to support the equity markets, some help for heavily indebted local governments who need to refinance maturing on and off-balance sheet debts. The People's Bank of China is continuing to loosen monetary policy, but the central government remains reluctant to provide real fiscal support for household demand. The rumoured increase in central government deficit from 3% of GDP to 4% of GDP is too modest to really change China's trajectory. So, who is driving global trade by demanding more output from the rest of the world? The US, of course. The decoupling that is visible to the bilateral data disappears when analysts step back and look at the broad patterns of global trade and the reality that China's massive goods surplus is now offset by the goods deficits of the US and the UK. End quote. And finally for today, we move to US-China. In a significant development, the FBI in the United States has arrested one Yaoning Mike Sun, 64, for allegedly acting as an illegal agent of the People's Republic of China while managing the 2022 campaign of a California City Council candidate. The arrest follows a criminal complaint filed on December the 17th and unsealed today. Sun is expected to appear in the Central District of California today. The complaint argues that Sun conspired with Chen Jun, a 71-year-old Chinese national sentenced to 20 months in prison last month for bribery and acting as an illegal agent of the PRC. Chen's activities included efforts to influence US local politicians, particularly regarding Taiwan-related policies. Sun, who served as a close confidant and campaign manager for a Southern California politician identified as Individual 1, allegedly communicated with Chen during the campaign to secure the candidate's election. Shortly after the 2022 election, Chen directed Sun to prepare a report for PRC officials on the successful campaign. The officials reportedly responded with gratitude, acknowledging the influence operation. The complaint details a post-election gathering in Rowland Heights described as a core member lunch, where participants discussed establishing a so-called US-China Friendship Promotion Association. Though Individual 1 did not attend, Chen referred to them as part of, quote, the basic team dedicated for us, end quote, in communications with PRC officials. Chen's broader activities included using Chinese funds to bribe federal agents and undermine the anti-Beijing spiritual group Falun Gong. This case highlights growing concerns over foreign interference in US elections, particularly by the PRC, and underscores ongoing federal efforts to safeguard American democracy from external influence. The investigation remains ongoing, and the charges against Sun carry serious implications for US-China relations and election integrity. Meanwhile, while we're on this theme, US-based The New York Times writes this week that China's so-called Panda diplomacy serves as a strategic tool to shape policy on Taiwan and cultivate relations with local US politicians. This approach was highlighted when San Francisco Mayor London Breed sought to secure pandas after a 2023 dinner and farewell with General Secretary Xi Jinping. Her request triggered months of informal negotiations, during which she visited China and met with top officials, including the vice president and a deputy foreign minister. The trip was orchestrated by the Chinese People's Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries, an organization linked to Beijing's efforts to influence foreign leaders. Intelligence officials have warned, however, that such initiatives aim to sway local policymakers on sensitive issues like Taiwan, leveraging the allure of pandas to secure political goodwill. Breed's pursuit of pandas, writes The New York Times, illustrates how China uses these symbolic animals to build ties with US local leaders, quote, who may lack the diplomatic training to recognize Beijing's strategic moves, end quote. Historically, China has denied pandas to cities whose officials took pro-Taiwan stances, reinforcing its geopolitical agenda. As tensions between Washington and Beijing escalate, quote, China's panda exchanges continue to serve dual purposes, promoting conservation and subtly influencing foreign policy, particularly on Taiwan, through carefully cultivated relationships at the local level, end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.